What's good, Bit Rushers? It's Kyler, and in today's video, we're going to be going over how to build a mining rig. I'm going to have 5 tips for you along the way. In addition to these 5 tips, I'm also going to be going through my mining rig build, my 5700 XT Red Devil. So I'm going to be lacing in footage of that, along with just my how-to and overview of all the different parts and the considerations you need to build your first mining rig. Before we get into today's content though, just a quick reminder, please follow me on Twitter at BitRush9000. Join us in our Telegram group, also at BitRush9000, link in the description. And I'm going to be doing a giveaway for September. I have a Moonlander USB miner valued at about 55 to 60 USD. I'm going to be giving that away at the end of September, so to enter, all you need to do is to comment on any of my videos within the month of September. At the end of September, I'm going to give it away to one lucky commenter. Alright guys, let's get into the content. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the GPU, your graphics card. This is going to be the heart of your mining rig. Mainly the first thing you want to consider, because a lot of the other parts and everything are going to, you're going to have to decide on this first before you decide on how big you're going to need it and what parts and things like that. So the first thing you need to decide is your GPU. Alright, so I have several GPUs that are popular to start: an RX 580. An AMD, a little bit higher end, is the 5700 XT. For NVIDIA, we have a 1070 and a 2070. Okay, and there's lots of other cards. So the main website you're going to want to go to kind of figure out what your specs are going to be is whattomine.com. So you can come here and plug in the number of graphics cards that you're going to buy. So, let's say we had 480s. Let's say we have 6 of them. Okay. And then you can come down here and plug in your kilowatt per hour cost, and we can calculate. And with the current costs, with 6 480s, you're looking at $12 a day. It's actually pretty good right now. And I meant to do 580s. So basically the same, 12-13 bucks a day. Alright? There's several things you want to look at. The first thing you want to look at when deciding on a graphics card is going to be your hash rate. So if we go to just one, we can see all the hash rates right here. So 1580 is going to get you 30 megahash per second. I can tell you from personal experience that the numbers on here are a little bit high. They tend to include like overclocking and BIOS mods as the maximum amount that you're going to get. If you plug in a 580 out of the box, you're not going to get 30 megahash a second. So just keep that in mind, that some of these numbers are a little bit off. I think you could probably get like 24, 25 megahash a second on a 580, like out of the box, but without overclocking it or modding the BIOS, you're never going to get 30. So that's just my personal opinion take that into consideration, basically, that some of these numbers are a little bit high. The next thing you're going to want to look at is the power consumption, okay? So if we look at this and we say 30 watts for 130 watts for 30 megahash per second, okay? So now let's turn that off and let's just go to say a 5700 XT. And we're going to get almost double that megahash, 51, right? So from 30 to 51, but like I said, the other card's probably going to get a little bit lower, and this one will actually get 50 out of the box. So it depends on what card you're on. And 150, right? 150 watts. So let's just look at that again. So 51 to 150, 30 to 130. So for 20 more watts, we're getting 20 more megahash, right? So you just take that into consideration when you're doing this calculation. The next thing you want to look at is the RAM and the CUDA core, and you're going to have to go to a different website, like probably on the actual manufacturer's website to find that stuff. But basically what that's going to tell you is this right here. Is the, how much RAM and how much CUDA core it has are basically determine the mega hash that you're going to get. So the higher amount of RAM and the more CUDA cores, the higher mega hash you'll get. So that's just a little bit more technical if you want to get into that stuff. The last and final thing, though, I would consider is price, right? So you have to see what's the price of the 580 versus the price of the 570, and then included in that price, you want to look at the longevity of those cards. So those cards typically last a year, 2 years, 5 years. What is it? And then what's the resale value, right? So I'll just tell you right now, a used 580 is going for $100. A used 570 or 5700 XT is going for the same amount that it's brand new. You can buy one for $400, 410, 350 range, maybe at the cheapest. But they're basically, they maintain their resale value, and we'll see that in a second with the 1070s and 1080s as well. So just something to think about if you're you're considering all of the aspects of buying a GPU and which one you may want. Are you starting with something lower and you're maybe going to build up later and going to need to resell these? Are you planning on having them for a long time and you're buying the highest end cards, right? So there's a lot of things to consider. Those are the main things. I'm going to just go through them again for you guys. So hash rate, power consumption, price, longevity, and resale value. Those are the things you should be looking at. All right, so I want to talk to you guys about some of these graphics cards. I originally was planning on going with 580s because a lot of the websites I see, say this is the cheapest build, it's a really great graphics card, you can mod it, you can overclock it, and you can get some really great hash rates, right? So I went out and I bought one for about $180. I plugged it in and tested it, and I also had a 1070 that I was running because I had a 1070 Black, which was my graphics card in my gaming PC, and I was running that one, and I was noticing that the power consumption on the 1070 was less, and I was getting much higher hash rates. Now, mind you, this is just out of the box. I hadn't modded anything, I hadn't done any overclocking, anything like that, just out of the box, okay? But the 580 cost me almost $200 brand new, and these are $500 brand new. But I was actually able to find some 1070s on sale used on eBay, 6 of them for $205 each, right? So it was probably somebody else who had a mining rig that was then selling their mining rig and getting rid of all of them. They had 6 of them, and so I bought all 6 for $205 each. Okay, so basically, I spent $25 extra from what I would have spent on the 580 at, $180, getting a brand new one versus getting a used 1070. So that's what I ended up doing on my first rig, okay? And this brings me to my first tip for you guys. My first tip is going to be buy one GPU and benchmark it and test it. Most stores, if you go to Best Buy or anything like that, even Amazon, I think, will do a return. They have a 15-day return policy, so you can find a GPU that's going to work best for you. Benchmark it, test it, run whatever kind of stuff you want to do and see if you're going to get the performance out of it that you want. I didn't plan on doing that. It just kind of happened that way, that I bought it and I tested it and I didn't really like it, and I liked my other one better, and I liked my 1070s better, so I just decided to bring back the 580 within my return period, and I bought a whole bunch of 1070s off eBay. Now, my most recent build, the one I'm going to be showing you guys today, I did go with the 5700 XT, and I did the Red Devil edition right here, $439 each. That's about what I paid for them, and the reason I did, if we come back here to the 5700 XT, this is actually going to be your most bang for your buck right now. Out of the box, you're going to get about 50 mega hash. I was getting a little over about 51 before I undervolted it. Now that I undervolted it, I think I'm getting about 49. And my power consumption is about 120 with the volt. So I'm about 4950, 120 watts. That's actually what I'm getting right here on ETH hash right now. So just keep that in mind, guys. Depending on, you know, the price is a whole lot more on those. So depending on your budget, where you are, and if this is your first build, you know, you really do want to take all these things into consideration and see the longevity of your cards, the amount of money they're going to earn back, and the cost that it's going to cost, not just to purchase them initially, but to actually run them with the electricity. Okay, so that's it for me for GPUs. I hope you guys learned something, and let's move on to the next section. Alright guys, for the second part of this video, we're going to talk about our mining rig. So what type of mining rig do you want to use? There's really going to be three type of rigs. The first type of rig is going to be an open air rig, which is one like this that you see, that it's going to have your motherboard and batteries and everything underneath, and up top some fans and some GPUs using risers. Okay, if you're indoors, and heat and cooling are going to be an issue for you at all, you're probably going to want an open air rig, okay? Because it's just going to be a whole lot cooler. Things aren't going to get as hot. The heat's going to dissipate a little bit more. So generally, this is what most people use. However, there are two other kinds of cases and rigs that you could set up. One is a server style rack, right? If you're somewhere in an air conditioned room, you have a temperature controlled area, if you're planning on co-locating into a data center, something like that, and you have your servers already set up, you can get one of these server cases and just plug it right into the rack, right? Just like you would, any other server. So, you could also use this at home if you had a server rack at your house, but again, you're going to want to make sure you have the cooling, because these cards are going to be really close together, and enclosed in here, it's going to get really hot. You are going to have the fans that blow the cool air through and then pull that air out the back side, and you see there's two sets of fans on this. But really, actually, it looks like there's three. There's some right here in the front, there's some in here in the middle, and then a couple in the back. But really, you're not going to want to run something like this unless you're in an air controlled, temperature controlled co-location data center type of place. And the same thing for this. This is another type. This one's more of like this one's actually an ASIC miner. So this isn't what I was looking for. So obviously we're not talking about ASIC miners, but there's ASIC miners too. What I was looking for is just a normal computer case style chassis they have, where it looks just like a normal computer case, except for the cards are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 6 going down. Basically, if you took this server and turned it up on its side, right? If this was on its side and it looked like a normal tower, that's basically what they look like. I thought this was one when I was browsing real quick. Now I'm seeing this is an ASIC. So that's not what I'm talking about, but you guys get the point. So it's basically like a normal computer case standing upright, but it has the slots for these. So that's going to be the third type. Again, I wouldn't recommend that for someone who, if temperature is going to be an issue at all, it's going to get really hot inside something like that. So that's mainly, again, only if you're in a, an air-cooled, temperature-controlled area. So this brings us to tip number 2. So for me personally, I think it's better if you're starting out on a budget to buy a bigger rig and build your way up, right? So let's just say you can only afford 6 graphics cards. Maybe you buy an 8-unit rig so that you can expand as you go. That's actually what I did when I started. I started with only about 4 or 5 graphics cards total. I could only afford, I priced everything out and I could only afford to build the rig with like 4. But I still wanted to buy an 8 GPU mining rig, because I knew eventually I'd buy 4 more, and I did. What I did is I bought 1 more every month, I think is what I did. I built it up, or I originally had 6, I'm sorry. So yeah, I originally had 6, and then for 2 months I bought an extra one until I had 8. So started with 6, and then I had 7, and then I had 8 the next month. So just bought an extra GPU every month with a little bit of extra money. So that's just my tip there. If you do want to expand and grow, I think it's better to buy a bigger expandable rig rather than a smaller one that you can afford right now, and just upgrade as you go. But that's my personal preference. Take that with a grain of salt. Do what you guys want with that. That's everything so far on these mining rigs. There are several different prices. These Kingwin ones are the first one I used, and they're a little bit pricier, but they're pretty sturdy. They're very nice quality. No complaints about them at all. I've also used the AAAwave one, which is a little bit cheaper. I don't see it right now, but it's just like a metal. Let me just type it in. And that's actually the one I've used for my my Red Devil rig. Here it is. So these are a little bit cheaper. You can see the pricing's less, but the quality of the materials is obviously a little bit skinnier and thinner. They're not full squares. They're just the L-shaped bracket. So you get what you pay for. Does it matter? I don't think so. Haven't noticed any major difference. It's just a matter of preference. If you want something a little bit bigger, more solid, sturdier, then I would go with the Kingwins. AAA waves are also great though too. So that's it for this section. On to the next. Okay, let's talk about power. So one of the next most important pieces of your mining rig is going to be your power supply unit, or your PSU. If you're using a 6 GPU mining rig, you can probably get away with 1,000 depending on the cards, how powerful the cards are. But for most rigs, you're going to need at least a 1200 watt. Okay, and the reason you're going to need a 1200 watt isn't because of the actual power restriction. Some of them you will need the extra power, but for the most part it's because of the pins. So to power all of the graphics cards, you need a bunch of the 6 or 8 pin plugs, and typically on most of your power supply units, your lower ones, your 500s, like if you were to buy 2 500s, you wouldn't have enough of the plugs. And so on the higher end or higher wattage power supply units, you get the extra cabling. So that's really the reason. You can try to get a lower, like an 800 or 600, like 2 600s, and try to maybe use splitters or something, if that's what you want to do and you're comfortable doing that. For me personally, I've messed around with several power supplies. This is one of my biggest areas of making mistakes and having to rebuy parts. So I'm just going to say this right out the gate, is it's better to buy a higher quality, higher priced power supply unit right off the bat than to get a cheaper one that's not going to last as long and you're going to have to buy a couple of them or whatever. So I had bought one originally like this, a 1600 watt power supply. It was specifically for mining. It was not this brand, but it was one very similar to this. And it melted down after a couple weeks. Like, it literally got too hot. The fan was super loud. It said it was going to be quiet. The on-off switch stopped working. It like melted down in there, and then some of the ends of the cables started to get melted, and I was concerned that it might start a fire or something like that. So it was rated gold. It was not. It was about the same price, about $100, and I would avoid 1600 watt mining power supplies like the plague. Stay away from them. Yeah, you're gonna save a couple $100, but if you're gonna potentially burn down your house, it's not worth it. Okay. Or melt all your graphics cards or something like that. So you want to stay with a good brand. I would recommend EVGA, Corsair, or Thermaltake. Where's Thermaltake? Right here. Thermaltake. So any one of those brands are going to be really good brands, and you're going to have a warranty. And then as far as like, yeah, stay away from something like this. $100 for 1600 watts is going to be absolute garbage, guys. So the next thing to consider is the electrical rating. So I wouldn't get anything under gold. Typically it goes bronze, silver, gold, platinum. Platinum are going to be the most expensive and also be the highest rated for electricity. So that means you're going to get the best rate. It's going to be the most efficient for the electricity use. So because we're running our mining rig basically 24/7, you're going to want the most efficient power supply you can get. So for me, that's going to be gold or above. So you can get a platinum one. Yeah, here's all platinums. I thought I had a gold one up, but I think all the ones that I actually have are gold. If you spend a little bit more, you'll get a platinum. And, you know, it is what it is, right? So you spend the extra money, you get a better one. But I would just recommend for you guys gold or above for your power supply. EVGA, Corsair, or Thermaltake are the brands that I would recommend that are going to be high quality and they're not going to melt down on you. As you can see, 1,000-watt platinum EVGA is running about $300. So I believe the gold edition of this 1,000-watt is actually what I'm using, and it is, I believe I paid about $200 for it. Let me just see if I can find that real quick just to show you guys. On my 6 rig, this is what I'm using right now. Let's see, EVGA 1,000-watt, and it's like a G5. Yeah, right here. So $200. This is the one I went with for my most recent build, my 5700. And this will power up to 4 graphics cards. So I'm going to actually end up having to get another 500-watt one like this too, or probably the 650 to run the other 2 GPUs. But just keep that in mind, guys. You know, what your pricing is, what you're going to pay, is definitely going to be reflected in the electric efficiency and the quality and longevity of your power supply. So don't buy one of those junk ones. They're only going to last a couple weeks, and you're going to end up having to buy another one anyway. Just spend the money up front and buy a nice one. Look at the plugs, the pins on the back, right? This is the main thing you need to look at, right? Make sure we have enough of everything that we're going to be able to power all of our graphics cards and all of our risers. So that's it for the power supply section, guys. Hope you learned a lot. On to the next section. Okay, we're on to the motherboard, CPU, and RAM. So for the motherboard, there's going to be several options. Currently, as of me making this video, one of the only boards that's available easily and cheaply is this ASUS B250 Mining Expert. I'm currently using this for my 5700 XT build that we're working on, my Red Devil build. And I can tell you I've had a few problems with this board, specifically the power to the HDMI built into it, so I keep losing power to my screen. I've had to remote desktop into it to actually do some of this stuff because my screen wasn't working, and I've heard some other people have problems with these boards. I typically like ASUS for most of my other computer parts. I love ASUS, but as far as the mining boards are concerned, I've just heard a lot of people have problems with these, and I've personally had a little bit of problem with my display. So just take that with a grain of salt, is what it is. Some of the other cards are like this Gigabyte. I have no experience with this one. Haven't really heard anything good or bad about it. Same thing with this BioStar. I haven't really heard much about it. I haven't done any research on it. Never owned it. This MSI board, the Coffee Lake, I believe it's called something like that. Yeah, Coffee Lake. This is actually the board I used on my 1070 rig, and I actually really love this thing. I haven't had any problems with it at all. It's worked perfectly. If I could, I would buy another one of these for my mining rig, but as you can see, it's currently $160. I think originally I paid like $65 for this thing, so it's like they're upcharging about $100 for this board now. I don't know if they just stopped manufacturing them, or just with everything that's happening with the shipping from China or whatnot. Why these are so expensive right now, but they're basically charging an extra $100 for this board. Of the two that I've used, the ASUS and the MSI, I would definitely prefer this one, but I didn't feel like spending the extra $100. So that one's up to you guys. Do your research on some of these other boards and pick the one that you think is going to be best for you. Brings us to our CPU. So all of these boards are going to be Intel CPUs with the 1151 socket. Okay, so what I recommend is just buying like the cheapest Intel Celeron processor for desktop. This is the one I'm using right now, $60. Cheap enough, it's going to get the job done. So for mining, you don't need your CPU really for anything. You don't need a powerful CPU for mining. All of the work and the heavy lifting is going to be done with the graphics card. So just buy a cheap one. If you are planning on doing dual mining, you may want to spend a little bit extra money and maybe get like an i3, an i5, an i7, or an i9. Depending, you know, it's going to use a whole lot more electricity, but it's also going to mine a lot better if you are doing dual mining. So just something to keep in mind there, guys. But for me personally, I'm just going with the cheapest Celeron I can buy, keep my costs low, and run my mining rig. Which brings us to the RAM. So this is something I actually made a mistake. I had watched a lot of other videos, and I'd seen people running their mining rigs with like one stick of 4 gigabytes or 2 sticks of 8, and I had tried to kind of skimp out and get two sticks of 4 gigabyte and run on 8 gigs. And when you're setting up the PC and everything, when you're setting it up and trying to troubleshoot and everything like that, doing multiple restarts, it's just way too dang slow, guys. So even if you can actually operate your mining rig on a 4 gig stick or on 2 4 gig sticks, you know, on 8 gigs, I don't recommend using it for the setup. Okay, so if you're gonna you know, kind of skimp on the RAM, make sure you have some other RAM that's gonna fit in there, maybe from your personal PC or gaming PC, that you can use while you're doing the initial setup of your operating system, while you're troubleshooting and overclocking, any of that kind of stuff that you're gonna need, you know, to kind of access the PC and actually use it. 4 gigs is just going to be too slow. 8 is okay, but again, you know, really I recommend using 16. If you can get 2 sticks of 8 and just go 16 gigs and leave it in there, if you have the extra money, that's what I would recommend, because then you're going to actually be able to use it when you need to. Or like I said, have the 16 gigs that you use during the setup, and then once you have everything set up and working optimally, swap them back out for the other RAM, just so it makes things easier for you in your life. And finally, the hard drive. You don't need much of a hard drive. The only thing you're going to need on here is your operating system and a couple little pieces of software, you know, the miner, possibly your overclocking software, possibly some flashing and some BIOS mod software, so not a whole lot. You could probably get away with 120 gigs. And I actually know some of these boards you can actually run on a USB drive. If you're planning on doing a Linux install, you could get a 120 gig USB and use that instead. Me personally, I like an actual hard drive. I like to do a solid state, and I like a little bit extra space just in case I ever need to reuse any of these parts or anything. 120 gig is basically, you can't do anything with it. So for me, it's $240. It's still only, a little under $30. And then you have a little bit of extra space for some software, or down the road, if you need to reuse this on another build or another PC or something like that, it's still, semi-usable at 240 gigabytes. So those are my choices for the parts, guys. Hope you guys learned something in this section, and on to the next. Alright guys, time to talk about risers and accessory cables. So these Dr.Meter ones are the ones I used for my 81070 rig, and these Mint Cell are the ones that I used for my Red Devil 5700 XT rig. So these cables, they actually work really great. I have no issues with these at all. The only downside I'm going to say is that they only have this 6-pin connector here, and so they give you the SATA to 6-pin adapter, but that's your only option. You can either go directly in with the 6-pin, or I'm sorry, I think that's actually a 4-pin. You can either go directly in with the 4-pin there, or no, it is 6, yeah, 6-pin. So you either go in with the 6-pin, or you can do the adapter on the SATA. But those are your only options. Whereas this other one, you see they have the Molex connection here. They have the SATA and the 6-pin. So if you're going to use the SATA cable, you don't need an adapter, which makes it nice. You can plug right in without having extra adapters, or you can go right in with a Molex if you needed. Okay, so that's why I went with these the second time, is because the first build around, I ended up not being able to plug all of them in with my power supply unit, which brings me to the next thing. I needed either some Molex to SATA adapters. I needed some extenders, right? And you may need these anyway. Your 6+2, so 8-pin total extenders. And what these do is just, if you're at a point where your power supply cabling isn't long enough and you want to do like good cable management and everything, sometimes you're going to need some of these just to extend them. And sometimes you might also need a SATA splitter. Because like I said, if we were going on the first set of risers there where there's only a SATA adapter, there's not enough SATA cables. So you actually need to, or on the power supply I had anyway, so I needed to get some of these splitters. Okay, so this brings me to my third tip. And my third tip is to make sure you order all of your accessories and the splitters and cables and things like that, and make sure you have extras, right? Like I would almost buy a couple of these even if you don't think you need them. You know, a pack of these each. And here's also some fan splitters, right? Some 3-to-1 fan splitters if you want all of the fans to be on the same controller. So something else to think about there. But yeah, guys, I recommend having these first because you don't want to start your mining rig build and then find out that you don't have a piece, and then you have to either order it on Amazon and wait 2 days or order it somewhere else and you're waiting like a week or more to get it. So order all of these kind of accessories, splitters, adapters, extenders. Order all of that stuff ahead of time and make sure you have a few extra on hand. When it comes to your risers, personally I like these better because of the fact that they have the additional plugs, but the one downside I will show you here is if you look at the riser, the USB comes off the side of the riser, so it actually makes it difficult the way the board is set up to plug in multiples of these right next to each other. I actually had to skip, so I had to go one in one slot, then the next one in the third slot, because this extender was blocking where the second slot would go. Okay, but on these ones, if you look, they go straight up, right? So when you plug them in, these come straight up, which is actually a better piece. So, you know, ideally, I don't know if somebody makes it, but one of these risers that has the different power connections, but then also has a straight up and down connector from the board, so where the USB plugs in straight up and down versus sideways. So just something to think about, the layout of these and how you're going to plug them into your board, and will they all fit. There's kind of a lot to it. It doesn't seem like when you're buying these parts and you know, you just buy them and think they're all going to plug in, and then you go do it, and it's like a puzzle trying to put it together. So just do a little bit more research on that, guys. Okay, that's all I'm going to say on that. Let's get to fans. So fans are fun. I actually have a pack of these. They come with a controller. They're going to use a little bit more power, but you can do the RGB modes and program them to kind of do different lighting sequences and things like that. So that's really fun if that's what you want to do, something like that. Also, I would recommend doing a little bit of research into the fans and how much air they actually push. So some of these fans look really cool and they got the RGB lighting, but you actually get the fan and it doesn't push that much air, and they're pretty expensive just because of the lights, and then the fan itself isn't pushing a lot of air. So for me, you know, if you have to go cool factor over cooling, I would go cooling and get one of these you know, better air pushing fans, you know, 1700 RPMs. This thing's going to push a lot of air. Nothing fancy, just a gray frame. That's up to you guys, depending on how cool or how hot it is in your space, how much air you want pushing over it, what kind of case you're using, all that kind of stuff are going to be factored in. For me, like I said, go with the one that's going to push the most air. If you can get one that pushes a lot of air and has some RGB lighting on it or something like that, that's a bonus, right? I'll leave that up to you. So that's everything for this section, guys. We covered fans, we covered our risers, and we covered all of our power extensions, splitters, and cable adapters. On to the next section. Okay, now that we have all our parts, we can start building and putting it together. I'm going to show you guys the video of me building my mining rig here. I'm just going to be edited down, so here we go. So as we start to build our mining rig, we can start to think about what we're going to do for an operating system, which brings us to tip number 4. So tip number 4 is to get a cheap or free operating system. So keep your costs down. Linux is free, right? So most installations of Linux are free. You can get Ubuntu is, you know, what I would recommend, but there's a bunch of other ones as well. And there's also several Linux-based installations that are specific to mining. We have Kudo OS, which is free. We have Smart Mining or Simple Mining OS, SMOS. We have like Hive OS. There's a whole bunch of different operating systems that are specifically for mining, and most of them are free or very cheap to use. So I recommend you looking up one of those. If you are planning on going with the Windows build installation, which is what I've done on all of mine, I would also recommend you to find a cheap version. So do not buy it full price. Don't go to the box store and buy it off the shelf. Don't go to Microsoft and buy it. The best way to do it is to go on eBay, and usually you'll find people on eBay selling a version of Windows 10 Pro for like $10 to $15. And what you do is you buy it, and they're just going to send you the keys. You have to go download, build your setup flash drive to do the installation yourself, but you just pay for simply the key, and it's going to be the cheapest way to do that. Finally, our last tip, tip number 5. So now that everything's built up and running, my final tip for you guys is to either set up your miner to automatically start when it's restarted or rebooted, right? So there's different software, depending on the mining software you're using, you can set that as a setting. I personally like Kudo Miner, and within Kudo Miner there's the ability to set it up to start on, or to launch on startup, and then to earn as soon as it's launched. So every time I start my computer, or my mining rig, Kudo Miner is going to start mining right away. And what this is good for is then I can remotely restart my PC or shut it down, and then start it back up, and I don't have to worry about setting anything up. The miner is going to automatically restart. If you are using like Claymore or Phoenix, you're not going to have the ability to do that. So what I would recommend in that case is to set up a remote desktop on your Windows build. If you're using Windows, you can easily set your PC up to have remote access, and then you can have one PC, your main PC in your house or whatever you use, that you can log into each one of these rigs remotely, so you don't have to worry about having a screen on everyone and a keyboard and all of that. And also, like I said, if there's a problem, you can just remote restart it. You can remote shut it down and let it cool for a little while, whatever you need to do, and then just easily restart it and get it up and mining again. So that's my final tip for that one, guys. And I did actually put that into use. If you guys heard on my last one with the 5700 build, my ASUS board was giving me a little bit of power problems on the HDMI cable, and what I was able to do is get it working at one point to where the screen was up. I immediately turned on remote desktop access, and from that point forward I did all of my installation on my other PC remotely. So these things do work. Hope you guys enjoyed my build. If you have any questions about any of the things that I've recommended to you, any of my tips, or any of the parts that I chose in my build, please leave a comment below, and I'll be sure to get back to you as quick as possible. For better responses, join my Telegram group. You can chat with me, and I'll do a little bit of troubleshooting as much as I am able to if I'm free and available. Other than that, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with friends and family, anyone else you think may like it. Please sub to my channel and hit the bell for notifications so you get notified as soon as I launch future content. Happy mining. Let's get that coin.